All right, looks like we're getting started here. Thank you all so much for coming. I believe this is our 5th Ask an Expert live stream. We're so excited. We're only 1 week away from the 2022 midterm elections. So we thought we'd take this opportunity to ask these experts some questions about voting, how to approach the topic with friends and family, and more. And stay tuned, because at the end, we'll be sharing some words from SaverLife members who want to share more about why they're voting, how they're voting. And today I'd have the pleasure of introducing two wonderful organizations that are here with us today. The California Asset Building Coalition and Prosperity Now. So I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Andrea, then Vanna, then Radha. But go ahead, Andrea, take it away.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I am Andrea Luquetta. I personally, I'm a former undocumented immigrant. I'm now a citizen, and I am a lawyer. I was a litigator. Now I run the California Asset Building Coalition. CABC is a coalition of hundreds and hundreds of people in California, all of whom do amazing work at local nonprofits and at some for-profits that help people to create more wealth in their life, material wealth, both in the immediate, gotta pay bills right now sense, and I need to leave something for my kids to inherit and make a life with sense. So that's the quick and dirty on who I am and what CABC does.
Awesome. And hi, everyone. I'm Vanna, Associate Director for Advocacy at Prosperity Now. Similar to Andrea's organization at California ABC, Prosperity Now's focus is on asset building for low to moderate income families. We also focus on bridging the racial wealth divide. But overall, our mission is to make sure that everyone in this country, regardless of race, economic background, has access to the American dream, has access to wealth building avenues. And so we do that work through both affecting policy, so working with organizations to bring about policy change, as well as strengthening programmatic work within local nonprofit organizations across the country. Have been with Prosperity Now for about 5 years. Prior to coming to Prosperity Now, I worked in organizing as well as a little bit of policy work. So I'm excited for today's conversation. Looking forward to talking to everyone about the importance of voting and making your voice heard over the next couple of weeks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Radha Seshagiri, and I'm the Policy Director at SaverLife. Danielle and I work together with members like you all across the country to hear about your priorities, what's important to you, so that we can advocate for the policies, the systems change that will make a difference in your lives and help you build assets.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. I think we're going to get into the questions now. Vanna, do you want to start us off with this question? Why does my vote matter?
Sure. And thank you. I think that's a great starter question. I think on a most basic level, and this is probably overused, but I say it all the time to people, whenever I encounter someone who just seems like they don't think that their vote matters, is if your vote doesn't matter, there wouldn't be so many people making an effort to take that right away from you every single year. There are concerted efforts across the country from folks who want to take away your vote. And so I don't think that people would be putting forth the money, putting forth the time and the effort to really take away this very fundamental right that we all have. So I think on a most basic level, just thinking about just how many people are trying to scrap that right from people. But besides that, I think of voting as the first rung in sort of the advocacy or the change ladder, if you will, when it comes to policy and politics. Voting is the very first rung of that. But moving beyond voting, once we get people into office, thinking about how much of our lives is affected by policy. Policy really affects every single facet of our lives, from our finances to our health, to our well-being, to our mental health. That's all affected by policy. And if we are going to if we're going to live in a way that allows for prosperity, we've got to have the right people in office making decisions that really align with our own values. So again, it just, voting is the very first ladder in the rung. It's a fundamental right. It's the entryway into civil engagement. And so I encourage everyone to do it. I know that we live in a hyper polarized world, but there's still everyday decisions that everybody can agree on that is affected by who we have in office. Decisions like fixing potholes in our roads, decisions like, local schools that our children go to, things that we can all agree on. And so, I just like to keep things simple and just show folks and talk to folks about the ways that voting affects us on the most basic local level.
That's great. Thank you so much. Andrea, do you want to say more on that or add anything?
I gotta agree with Vanna. I think, having been an undocumented immigrant, and then, when we were able to get our papers in order, we lived with a green card. So I lived with a green card for most of my life. And then when I was finally able to become a citizen and the rest of my family became citizens, voting was the way that we used to, we'd gather around the table and actually, or by text, now we do it by text and we ask each other, who are you, what are you saying on this question and who are you voting in this race? And especially my younger sister who's, really wants to do the right thing. And so she'll ask us all, and we use it, with each other in my family and in my community to really sort of figure out what we want. And we never lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, it's people who are making decisions and they vote at the highest levels. We vote for them. We vote on specific questions that are on the ballot. And it is people. It can sometimes feel so overwhelming and feel like, well, it's just a system or it's just a machine or it's just these politics and it feels, really disembodied, like you don't have any power over it, but we do. And each individual vote has just that much power. And if you group us together, we collectively do have power. It matters because, otherwise they wouldn't be fighting so hard, not only to keep us away from voting, but they wouldn't be fighting so hard for us to vote one way or the other. They spend a lot of money. Trying to get us to vote, one way or the other to sway our opinions and to keep the people that they don't want voting away from voting, which tells me, like Vanna, it really must matter. If they're that scared, if it's that important to them, let it be that important to us at least.
I love that. Thank you. And I love that you were able to bring up how community can really make a difference when it comes to voting.
Oh yeah, all my friends, I'm all, seeing it on Facebook or on WhatsApp or on group text, like, hey, especially the judges, everybody always has questions about the judges because they don't really spend a lot of money educating for commercials. And so we're all talking to each other like, who do you know? And who do you know who knows? So we'll pull in that information so that we can make an informed choice. And it's a great way, honestly, it's a great way to just have a conversation with friends and family members on issues that affect us, daily in a material, way.
That's great. Radha, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Wow, some powerful statements by Andrea and Vanna. I also wanted to call out how it must matter. If it matters in terms of ads, in terms of gerrymandering, in terms of taking our vote away, it must matter a lot. And what can we do? We can talk to our friends and our families about it. We can talk to our neighbors about it. We can organize. And we can exercise that right. We can exercise that privilege to vote. It's our voice.
Definitely. Well, it seems we have a second question here. How are voting and my finances related? Does anyone want to take that on first?
I'll take that on. First of all, I would love to challenge the notion. I think when people talk about finances, we immediately jump to bills. How are, my bills and gas prices and how am I going to make rent and, what's going to happen with my kids' tuition or after school activities, right? We think about our little budgets and, we have to remember that everything that Vanna mentioned, the potholes, the school systems, all of the public resources that either exist and are nourishing and feeding a healthy community, neighborhood, all the infrastructure. We need to really fight for that. And it's worse even in the communities where there are lots of potholes and the garbage isn't being picked up and there is poor infrastructure. We need to fight, for that. And when we live in communities where that infrastructure isn't well supported, it means, tires need to be replaced more often. It means our cars wear down more. It means our kids aren't getting the right kinds of textbooks and education or extracurricular activities, which is going to then affect their college life. So finances, I would challenge you to say, how is voting and my economic well-being related? And one thing that I will call out on the big national election is, abortion and women's health care. Right now, every person that you love who wants to or is capable of gestating a child is going to have their future possibly decided by people who don't know them. And you know them, you love them. And so your ability to vote in favor of certain, congressional, especially in the midterms that are coming up, that really affects everyone who is capable or wants to have a child. I know that family planning has been hugely important in my family. Like, lives change on whether you have to or are able to have the children that you want. That's a whole economic conversation right there for the rest of your life. And that's one way that we absolutely have a duty and a responsibility to vote, because if we don't take care of our own family planning needs or support the people that we love in their ability to plan the families that they want to have, that they deserve to have at the time that when they're ready, when they're economically, have the economic future that they want to have and that we deserve, we really have to voice our opinions on these issues, because if we don't, we're leaving all of those economic choices to people who don't know us and don't care about us.
That's really powerful. Thank you so much. Vanna, is there anything else you'd like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, that was very well said, Andrea. I was actually listening hard to you, and I almost lost my train of thought for what I wanted to add. But I love that you not only talked about finances, but economic well-being as a whole. And I think that's the right way to look at it. Voting is directly tied because, of course, whoever is in office is going to be making decisions that directly affect our economic well-being, regardless of where you sit in terms of wealth, whether you're low income or high income. Everyone of our legislators are making decisions to impact that. Whether it's how much money we're bringing home every so often in our paychecks through taxes, or if it's whether or not we can get a loan from a certain bank or a certain financial institution, and the ways in which policy regulates them. Or, as we've seen over the last 2 years with this COVID-19 pandemic, whether we'll have additional money coming from our governments to assist us and help us to get out of an economic crisis that was caused by the pandemic. So I can't emphasize enough just how much legislators really make policy decisions that affect, our paychecks, that affect our ability to move up the economic well-being ladder. And so whether we vote or not, these decisions are still going to happen. And so I always challenge people, they're going to happen anyway. So make your voice heard in terms of making sure that the folks whose values align with your own are voting in your best interests. And so, yeah, I just can't overstate it, the amount of ways that voting and that policy in general really impacts our everyday lives and our everyday finances.
That's great. Thank you so much. Radha, is there anything else you'd like to add? I know being at a nonprofit that focuses on wealth building, especially for low and moderate income households, this topic I know comes up a lot.
Wow, it's hard to follow in the footsteps of Andrea and Vanna, who put it so beautifully. Every single decision, every way we cast our vote has an impact on our finances ultimately, every single way. We saw that with the child tax credit and what a big impact that made on our lives, on SaverLife members' lives, and millions of like them nationwide, and how that meant putting food on the table and fixing a car, how that meant saving up for a home and putting away money in your business. It allowed for choice, it allowed for freedom. And those are people who vote for the child tax credit. There's elected officials who vote for the child tax credit, and we have choice over those elected officials.
We really do. And speaking of choosing who our elected officials are, we get this question from time to time, and I know it circulates in the news a lot, but how are the midterm elections different from years when there's a presidential election? I don't know, Vanna, if you wanted to take that on first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different in terms of, I hate to say it like this, but I think that's just the reality of it. Midterm elections are probably not as sexy as the presidential elections. There's not, there's not, it's, the advertisement or the talk about these elections are not nearly as grand as, say, a presidential election. But they are equally, if not more important, I would say more important than presidential elections. I don't think a lot of the energy is typically there around midterm elections. Again, because you're not seeing just the glitz and glamour of presidential candidates. You're not getting all these advertisements around debates and such. But again, it's more important, in my opinion, than the presidential election. Every House member, of course, is up for re-election during the midterms. They're re-elected every 2 years. It has great impact on the makeup of Congress. Right now, Democrats have a supermajority controlling the House, the Senate, and the presidential and the White House. The House is up for House members are up for re-election this year. So obviously there's a chance for the House to turn over to Republican hands. There's just so much at stake right now for the different policies, for the different policy agendas, policy priorities moving forward. So it's huge. It has the ability to change the makeup of Congress. And like I said, I think a lot of times people just feel like midterms are less important, but I challenge people to really think about the importance of midterms. Not only are House seats up for re-election, but there's some key governor's races across the country, school boards, even locally. There's some really important school board races. There's some important Senate races that could flip the Senate as well. So just looking at it from a policy perspective and not so much of a political perspective, and looking at who's in the White House, I think it just is critically important when we look at it from policy and the ability of our real lives changing perhaps in the next 2 years. So that would.
Yeah, I would just add to that, if you voted in the presidential elections and you don't vote in the midterm, then you're not really supporting the person that you voted for president. When you vote in the midterms, what you're doing is helping the president. You're helping to check or support or both the person that is the president, because the president can only do so much. They have to go to Congress to ask for support for what they're going to do on student loans, what they're going to do on housing policy, what's going to happen, like as I mentioned, on reproductive healthcare rights. They can't do it alone. They really either depend on the number of people in the Congress who will support them and make their vision that they pitch to you in those every 4 years. You get those grand messages and those visions of what they're going to do and all these promises. But if we don't then deliver the backup support that they need, then we just leave them, out on a limb, unable to really do much. But we have to follow it up. We have to not just vote every 4 years. We got to vote every time that there's an election, because everybody has to work together. And the more people that you elect who will walk in the path that is in your vision of how you want your life to be, then they can work together to make that vision come true for us. If we don't do that, then we're going to leave it in the hands of the people who are going to vote. And if you stay home and other people vote and they don't share your vision, guess what? The candidate that you voted for, 2 years ago is not going to get the kind of support that they need to make those promises come true.
And I'll add something if I can, Danielle. And just thinking about some of the policies that we've mentioned, I think the child tax credit has been mentioned, and we've seen ways in which that's lifted families out of poverty just in a short term. Other than that, student loan relief, I think, is still in flux. I think there's some issues with the Supreme Court. We've seen, housing, the need for additional housing to support housing affordability. A lot of these types of issues are really still in flux in Congress. They were not completely resolved within over these 2 years of this current Congress. And so a lot of those issues will be rolling into 2023 in the new Congress. So it's critically important for voting purposes that we get people in office who are going to support or oppose, whatever issue we want to see passed or want to see fail in this upcoming Congress. So just for the sake of the issues that are still in flux, very important issues as it relates to asset building and wealth building. So very important issues for folks to pay attention to, and all the more reason to vote in this midterm election, at least on the federal level.
Most definitely. Radha, is there anything you wanted to add before we get into some more questions here?
Yeah, I wanted to build on the comments and say that where I live, the number one problem is homelessness. We've got and housing affordability in general. We've got several issues to deal with. But housing affordability and homelessness is the number one issue, and it's visible. We see a lot of homeless folks around, and it's a real problem. We have to address it. There's a ballot measure. There's a local measure on my ballot this time on addressing housing affordability. If I don't cast a vote, I don't know if anything is going to move on housing affordability. I have to vote. That has to change. I cannot wait 2 years. Like that, there are a lot of local measures too that require that vote, require that we speak up so that things can change.
Exactly. So I know we talk a lot about getting people to vote, encouraging folks to, get out there and use their vote as their voice. But I want to bring it down onto a personal level and maybe ask you all, what does sharing your voice through your vote mean to you?
That's a good question. I think for me, outside of just sort of my everyday life and, being able to operate and to prosper, I guess, in the world, I think for me, it goes back to my ancestors. And for me, voting for me is simply honoring the legacy of my ancestors and people who fought so hard in this country to even have a voice. And so I feel like I would be doing them a disservice by not exercising my right to vote, by not making my voice heard on every level, voting in presidential elections, midterm elections, voting, down the ballot all the way down to school board and sort of local level offices. But yeah, just doing a service to my ancestors and really doing it as a way to say thanks to them for sacrificing so much, their very lives, to make sure I have this right.
Yeah, I can't, yes, all of that. I think it's so personal. I'm sort of an odd person in that I learned about economics in high school. And, as I said, my family's formerly undocumented, and we struggled economically so much. And then when I discovered that there was a whole world called economics, it changed for me, because economics used to mean, when I was a kid, I thought it was like, some powerful thing that, we could never affect. And then I learned about economics, and economics is still really, at the end of the day, people somewhere making decisions about what this is going to cost, what that's going to cost, how much they're willing to give you if you spend a certain amount. And that is true from everything from groceries to our roads, to our libraries, to our rights. To me, economics is a hugely powerful arena where we have to play. And if we don't play, if we don't show up, then we're just, I don't know, it's sort of like giving up. And I know that there's a lot, it can be really intimidating when especially when things get really loud. If you have a local race that's really hotly contested, it can start to feel like you're drowning in all of the messages or all of the lawn signs, and you feel like, oh my God, I don't even know enough. But You don't have to be an expert. You really don't. You just have to go with your gut, or ask a friend. That's all you need. And you just, you just fill in the little thing, and that's it. You send it off, you mail it, or you drop it off, or you go in person, and you feel good because you spoke up. How often do we get asked to speak up, and it really matters? Half the time, I know, especially, in some places, people ask you to speak up, and you invest, and you tell your story, and you get it all out, and then you're not sure, but this is clear. This is counted. It's counted or not counted. It's it's black or white. It's yes or no, and that's really important.
That's great. And I love that you brought your ballot with you, which it could be a perfect segue to my next question. How did you all feel the first time you voted compared to now? And maybe we could start with you, Radha.
Yeah, sure. I thought it was really exciting that I got to vote on my own. And I'd always been in discussions with my extended family or my parents about their choices to vote, and I found it really exciting when I could vote on my own. It was really fun to go to the polling place and fill out the little bubbles and drop off my ballot. And I still like that feeling of going to the polling place or dropping it off physically, dropping off the ballot physically. It really feels, I look forward to it. It's kind of exciting.
I honestly, I can't remember the first time that I voted, but I remember what it was like voting for President Obama. I got chills just thinking about it. For my whole family, it meant so much to have someone like him, like them, the whole family. And I still carry that feeling because we may not have him or them, on the ballot, but we have the people, I still am in awe of their vision, plus other people that whose vision I really, really am impressed by. And I really hold on to, what life could be like. I think that's really important. I know what I want for my life, for my kids' life, for my family's future. And that's what I do. It may not feel like that's what you're doing, but it is what you're doing. It's one way that you get to shape your life and your kids' life and the life of people around you.
Absolutely. And I will echo Radha's sentiment that I was excited the first time I got to vote. I won't give away my age by telling you what election that was, but I just remember feeling like such an adult. Like, you mean to tell me I get a say in the things that are happening in the world? And I remember arguing with some classmates at the time. So maybe that was my entry into doing this type of work. But I just remember being excited that I finally got a chance to do this mysterious thing called voting. But in terms of how I felt then versus now, I think the excitement certainly was there back then for me feeling like an adult. And I think back then I did it out of just duty. Like I mentioned earlier, like duty to my ancestors. Whenever I get the chance to do this thing called voting, I'm going to do it. People fought for this. Whereas now, in addition to duty to my ancestors, doing this type of work, I realize the true impact that voting can make in terms of policy decisions down the line. So for me, in addition to it being about impact, is that I've seen the real effects of voting and the real effects of having, the right people in office. So, that's how I feel now. And that's how I'll continue to feel about it. And that's the conversation that I have with my family and friends when it comes to voting.
Definitely. And I think especially, after the 19th Amendment was passed and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were passed, is especially important now that everyone who is able to vote has an equal opportunity to vote, that they do express as some people will call it, their civic duty to vote.
When we vote, we're also making it possible for other people to vote too, depending on who we elect, right? Because as Vanna mentioned, there are a lot of people, including people who are in office right now, who are doing their hardest to keep people that we know and that we love and that we respect from voting. And there are people who are in office and who are also running for office who are going to work their hardest to expand the vote, to increase the number of people who can vote, to include the people who we know and love and respect who currently don't have the right to vote. So if you want to have your family members or people in your community that you really, that right now aren't able to vote for some unfair reason, just because somebody didn't want to hear their voice, this is also a chance to do something for them. And if we vote for the right candidates who will increase the number of people who can vote, then we just build our power that much stronger.
For sure. Vanna, you mentioned voting, in service of your ancestors, and I feel like that's a great tie-in to this question of how do you all approach the topic of voting with friends and family today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and I don't know if this is by virtue of me doing the work that I do or just like being an aware human being in this world, but like I think the topic is certainly easier because of sort of the politics of the world, or the ways of the world. There's so much craziness going on in the world. We're seeing it every day with policy and with different things in the news. So there's just a lot of contentious things happening. And so I think these conversations happen more naturally now because people are paying attention more to the ways of the world. But me doing this work, I am, when it comes time, when GOTV time comes around or election season comes around, I'm always in group chats with my family, asking them, did you all vote? Did your polling place change? And everybody know what's on the ballot. So we're just always having these conversations, and we have for the last several cycles. But like I said, I definitely think because of the way of the world now and the way things are so polarized, I think it is a little bit of it's a harder conversation in some ways because we know kind of what bad policy, in my mind, bad policy could come about from not voting. But we also know of, we talk about ways in which change can come about through our vote. So like I said, we talk in our group chat as we're coming up on election season and making sure people know where to vote, know what they're voting for and all that good stuff. And I challenge my family members and friends to tell their family members and friends about it. I blast out on social media all the time, different things about elections. So just whatever I can do to keep the conversation going. And I think a lot of times we can stigmatize, not knowing certain things about elections. I think that can be stigmatized, folks not knowing where their polling places are, not knowing who's in the election. But I think the more we can kind of soften that and be open to having just conversations and answering very basic questions, I think the better it is for all of us, and the more likely it is for us to get folks out to vote. So just opening ourselves to be a resource to people who may not know some of the things about voting that we know. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to be able to be that resource for folks, especially if it's their first time voting or the first time voting in a while. Just being open to conversations. I think that's great. Looks like we're at time here, so I'd love to close with this last question. How are you voting this year, in person, by mail? And is there anything you'd like to share with SaverLife members as they get out to vote in the next week?
I like to vote by mail, simply because you can see I have my ballot here. I like to sit down and, as Vanna mentioned, get on my Facebook groups and text my friends. I especially like, if I don't know something, I get to talk to an expert, right? Like I get to call somebody and catch up, sometimes with people who I haven't been, but I know that they know about, this thing. So it's an excuse to call them up and say, hey, what do you think? And then I make up my own mind based on whatever research I can find, whether it's online or with my, people who I think are experts or at least know more than I do. I get to talk to my friends, my family. We have a group chat already with pictures of our ballots and say like, how are you? What's going on with this question? And then I can sit down and this year I'll be sitting down with my 4-year-old, and hopefully she'll want to circle in some of the bubbles with me. Although she thinks that things are boring. So, but anyway, I want her to see me voting, and that's my favorite way to vote. because I can take my time, I can do my research, and then I can take it to the post office, and know that it's safe and secure. And I've spent all the time that I needed to with it. I think as far as what I'd like for folks to remember, I don't know. I think we've talked about a lot of it. I think especially I know that folks who are SaverLife members are really, really thinking about their future, and I think that there's just like socking away a little bit whenever you can for the future that you're trying to build. This is also something that should go hand in hand with what you're doing with your finances. This is what you're doing, to help shape the policies that affect your finances and your economic well-being. So it's as important. It's really important. And you can it's easy, it's really easy. You can just go to vote.org to see if you're registered, make sure you are, and then, sign up to get your ballot by mail so you can sit down with whoever's in your household, and make it an activity.
I love that, Andrea. I had not thought of the phone a friend aspect when it comes to voting by mail, but I absolutely love that. I hadn't thought of it, but that's a great incentive to do so for folks in states that allow vote by mail without cause. But for me, I like going in person. And I would say probably 95% of the reason that I like going in person is to get the I voted sticker, like just to get the little sticker. I mean, it's a sticker, but I
you meet your neighbors and yeah.
And going to the grocery store later and, boldly wearing my sticker and hopefully encouraging other people to go out to vote. But I enjoy just the in-person process. And so I would say that. But yeah, I mean, I'll echo what you said, Andrea, about, what members should remember about voting is, to your point, as people are working on their personal finances and thinking about their own future on an individual level, voting is a way for folks to think about the future on a community level, or a statewide level, or even on a national level. It goes beyond our own personal needs, but thinking about the well-being of the community. Voting is certainly the first step in that. And so I just encourage people to make a plan to vote. I think that's what I would leave people with. Lastly, is not only to say, yes, I'm going to vote, but to go and make sure you know where to vote, and that you know what's on the ballot. And if your state or locality allows it, vote by mail, like Andrea suggested, and maybe phone a friend if you don't understand what's on the ballot. But in short, just making a plan to vote, and just understanding that it matters, as we've tried to echo throughout this conversation. So that's what I'd leave folks with.
I will follow up and say my one thing I'd like SaverLife members to remember about voting is to make that plan. Know when and how you're going to vote. If you're going to go to a polling place, know when they're open, know how you're going to get there, when you're going to get there. If it's Tuesday afternoon, know that it's at the gym around the corner, wherever it may be. Or if you're voting by mail, which is going to be my case, I'm going to know where I drop that off. Is it a ballot box or is it the post office? Know those details. Know the deadline. And we're going to make it easy for you at SaverLife because we have a one-stop guide. Go to SaverLife.org. It has everything, all the information that you need to register, to make your plan, all in one place.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and play some videos from SaverLife members who are going to share how they're voting, why voting is important to them. But again, thank you all so much for your expertise and insight. And we're excited to get our members out there to vote and vote ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For first-time voters, I recommend doing it. I didn't take a part in our country's voting system until I was way old, because I just felt like my vote wouldn't do anything, that it wouldn't make a difference, and that's complete stupidity. Every vote matters. Every vote matters. It's absolutely imperative that everybody vote if you're able to, because One day you may not be able to. You know, we are a country where everybody has the right to vote once they get a certain age, so you need to exercise your constitutional right to vote. Thank you.
Hi. What does voting mean to me? It means freedom, and it means that my vote and my voice are heard and that I matter. I've been voting since I've been able to vote, age 18. It's your civic duty and it's your right. So one piece of advice that I have for first-time voters is go in there and vote. We live in a democracy where our vote counts, and we need our representatives to represent us on the whole. I'll probably go either before or after work, or if I'm off that day, I'll go anytime on election day.